This is the Reading Instruction Show. I'm your host, Dr. Andy Johnson, and as you can see, the title of this presentation is called Mouse World, Teachers Unions, and Reading Instruction. Now, I am a strong advocate of unions because individually we have no voice. The people with the most money and power have very loud voices. They're able to hog the conversation. And I am just a little mouse. The big mice, their mouse voices are influential. People think that what they have to say is somehow more important than what I have to say. No matter how sound the reasoning I use, and no matter how much research and research-based knowledge that I present, I'm just a little mouse with a quiet, squeaky little voice. Nobody much knows that I exist, and very few really care what I have to say. I'm a little mouse with a very little mouse podcast and a teeny tiny mouse tube channel. I have no voice. People think that what I have to say is of very little importance. But here's the thing. I am just fine with being a little mouse, living a happy little life in Mouse World. However, the big mice are messing things up. They're making educational decisions that benefit not mouse children, but other big mice. The policies and statutes they put forward severely limit the potential of mice children who are trying to learn to read. Now the big mice blame mouse teachers while defunding mouse schools. Then they say the problem is mouse parents, while making it necessary for mouse parents to work 2 jobs just to put cheese on the table. Their goal is to control and manipulate to get intended outcomes, which in their case is more money and power. They see schools as Skinner boxes, offering pellets and electric shocks to get students and teachers to toe the line. Back in early 2000, the big mice tried to control the whole educational system through the No Child Left Behind Act. That was going to change things. Now we're really going to have fine education, they all said to themselves back then. This will fix things. But if you look at No Child Left Behind, you see that it didn't fix anything. And here we are again. No Child Left Behind was just a bunch of electric shocks. It was just a plan to make bad things happen. We'll make them pay for private tutors. We'll fire their principals, take control of their schools, and eventually the bad schools who aren't performing will go away, they said. But it didn't really happen that way, did it? Why is that? It's because they took prayer out of the public schools, they said. It's a liberal agenda. It's the Department of Education. It's because of the intellectual elites. It's because of teachers' unions. It's because they're not teaching phonics. So back then in 2002, the big mice spent $5 billion of public money on skills-based Phonics First programs called the Reading First Initiative, very similar to the science of reading mandates currently in law or statute in 38 states. The Reading First Initiative attempted to steer lucrative reading contracts to the individuals who controlled the program. Now that $5 billion could have been spent on things that really would have made a difference. Like what, they say? Well, here's the thing. You want simple answers for complex questions. How much public money has been wasted by simpletons who think that they have a simple answer for complex issues? They think they know more than the, quote, intellectual elites, who they say waste their time doing research and scholarly work in things like teaching children. They alone, they think, know the causal variable for all reading problems that has somehow managed to escape the grasp of hundreds of thousands of teachers, researchers, and scholars. They believe they have some sort of magical educational insight that's enabled them to clearly see the cause of reading problems and have the answers to all reading problems. Money and power. The views and values of those with money and power will always take precedent over those with less money and power. That's just the way it is in mouse world. The values of those with money and power become American values, the right values, the moral values. Their values represent decency. Any other values, by definition, then become un-American, indecent, and immoral. The views of those with money and power become majority views, the normal views, the democratic views, the views that are best for our country and for our economy. When they speak with great emotion and fervor, they are passionate. Views other than these become extremist, out of step, fanatical, radical, or partisan. And when they speak with great emotion and fervor, they are ranting. So the difference between a ranting diatribe and a passionate homily, democratic and radical views, immoral values and moral values, money and power. Right and wrong, normal and abnormal, decent and indecent are all determined by how closely the views and values of others align with those who have money and power. And these are just the perks of money and power. Gollum's ring. In mouse world, money and power become like Gollum's ring. Those who have it crave it even more. They grasp onto it, holding it tightly with white knuckles. My precious! Those with money and power don't exist to have less money and power, and they don't exist to give it all away. Rather, the existence of those with money and power is predicated on the need to maintain the status quo so that they can continue to accumulate more money and power. And they will do almost anything to keep things just as they are. And they tell themselves, and any who will listen, that they deserve to be big mice because they are the mice who are big. And what big mice fear the most is mouse teacher autonomy. This would lead to creative and critical thinking, evolution, and, oh my goodness, dynamic change. Change would not be good for big mice. Change would upset the whole order of things, you see. They'd have to give away the ring. Now, I must admit that it's a pretty good system if you're a big mouse sitting on top of a big pile of cheese and manipulating all the little mice who are making you the cheese. The system works just fine for you. You're getting lots and lots of cheese. You got more cheese than you can eat in 1,000 lifetimes, but you still need more. But for the little mice who are trying to feed their mouse families, send their children to mouse college, get good mouse care, and buy a mouse house, the system doesn't work so well. It's not very mouse friendly. Not so much cheese. And there are even some big mice who put profit over people. They see public schools as their own private ATM machine, used to extract public funding for their profits. Now think about this, Minnesota and all the other states who have enacted these science of reading mandates. Where does all the money go for these initiatives? Yes, it goes to the schools, but then what must the schools spend it on? In Minnesota, where will that $100 million of public money go? Who benefits from this? Whose lives will be improved? Who gets all the cheese? Now, somewhere along the line, little mice discovered that if they banded together with other little mice who have quiet, squeaky voices, all of us little mice become one big mouse with a loud squeak. If we create a union of mice, our voices get heard, and we have a place at the table with the big mice. This is what a union is for. It's a way for all the little mice to become a big mouse and have a place at the table and to have a say into the things that impact their working lives. We not only get more cheese, but we're able to make educational decisions based on what's best for our mouse children. But the big mice did not become big mice by being big dumb mice. They quickly learned that if the little mice became too big, they could severely impact their cheese profits. Even though the little mice worked to help create the cheese, the big mice wanted to severely limit excessive cheese distribution. "It's ours," they said. "We earned it. We are big mice. We deserve to have more cheese." So the big mice discovered that if they disempowered the individual mice, and if they denigrated and demoralized mouse unions, the big loud union mouse sitting at the table becomes a small quiet mouse again, and is soon relegated to the children's table, where their little squeak is rarely heard. The big mice found that you can shrink and silence mouse unions if you convince all the non-union mice that the union mice are bad and lazy or getting away with things. "They're getting a lot of cheese and not doing their jobs," they say. "They need to be held accountable." "Mouse unions are communists," they say, not knowing the difference between communism and socialism. "They make people lazy and unmotivated. They protect bad mice. They eliminate competition." Oh yes, competition. That's very important to big mice, so they say. They say that competition will solve all mouse and cheese problems. They say that if little mice compete for the little bits of cheese on the ground, that all the bad mice will go away and all the good mice will rise to the top. Competition is good for little mice, they say. But at the same time, the big mice give themselves corporate subsidies, tax breaks, and special rules that enable them to win. Competition may be great for a Quickie Mart gas station, but it's not so great for public schools. This mouse competition merely moves the cheese around. It gives a little more to some mice and a little less to other mice. And the bad mice, who weren't really bad mice in the first place, but simply didn't have the tools to be good mice, don't go anywhere. "Well, I pulled myself up by my mouse bootstraps," the big mice declare. "I was able to use the connections that I made at Harvard and the government contracts that I secured through my connections and contributions to rise to the top. I competed and I won. I'm better than you see. I am winning. I deserve to have more cheese. The little mice deserve what little cheese they have." The big mice also learned that they could manipulate mouse unions by manipulating the mice at the top of the unions. So they treat union leaders with deference, and they trick them into thinking that they have power and influence and that they're special. The union leaders get a taste of power and influence. They get a taste for all the fancy cheese, and they like it. They start to see themselves as big mice. And eventually the union leaders forget that they are little mice. They start acting like big mice, making decisions for the little mice, and they tell the little mice what's best for them. They control information, access, and power so that they can continue to feel like big mice. The little mice eventually discover that they've traded one big mouse for another. Now, there are several models for unions. The organizational model seeks to organize and empower all the individual mice so that they're empowered to have a say. Big mice don't like this model. Big mice like the service model for unions. They like it when union leaders act like big mice. These mice are easy to control. They like it when union leaders make the decision for all their little mice. They like it when union leaders tell the little mice what's best for them. Eventually, the little mice realize that the mouse union doesn't listen to them. It doesn't represent them. It doesn't communicate important information or share in the decision-making. It does nothing to ensure the quality of their mice lives. So, one by one, the little mice leave the mouse union, and the big mice clap their furry paws together and laugh with glee. Once upon a time in Minnesota Mouse World, there was a teachers' union called Education Minnesota. One day, Professor Mouse thought about it and asked nobody in particular, in the science of reading debacle and the Read Act in Minnesota, where are our teachers' union? Where has Education Minnesota been? Yes, state legislatures have the right to impose statutes, absolutely. But teachers' unions have the right and the moral obligation to respond. The Read Act and other science of reading mandates strip away teachers' rights, an obligation to provide the type of instruction that is best for their mice children. Teacher mice are forced to spend hours in state-mandated professional development programs paid for by tax dollars. They force schools to purchase state-mandated reading programs. The teacher profession is becoming deprofessionalized, and you unions say nothing. Teachers are now expected to open the teacher's manual and follow the script. Shut up and follow the script. We don't have mouse teachers, we have script followers. Now, teacher empowerment has been central to good education. Teachers' unions have led to better schools, better educational outcomes, and better teachers. Yet teachers' unions have let outside interests change public education. You sat silent as teachers have been asked to do more with less. You sat silent as teachers are forced to implement one-size-fits-all scripted reading programs. Teachers are forced to engage in state-mandated educational malpractice for reading instruction, and you say nothing. Anybody can say nothing. The only thing worse than not having a union is having a union that does nothing. Our teachers' unions have become timid little mice.